but not without redirecting it. I encouraged anyone in my congregation who had the financial resources to engage this needed consumption with a new end in mind. What if each of us began to embody the values of the Make-A-Wish Foundation in our personal lives? What if, motivated by our patriotism, the current economic circumstances, and the teachings of the one we call Lord, what if we were to get back to traveling, as our president has suggested, but not we ourselves? Rather, we could make it possible for a family who has never seen Disneyland to go and have a good time. What if we were to make a major purchase, like buying a new car with cash, and once you've bought that new car, give it to someone who needs it? Many later told me in the silence that followed, they were overwhelmed by all kinds of realizations. How blessed they were to have the resources to actually be able to do this. How shocked they were that I would suggest such a thing. How exposed they felt knowing that they could pull off a much-needed win-win if only their generosity would allow them. It seemed that almost everyone recognized that this is what it might look like to follow Jesus and to address the immediate economic crisis. In the mid-1980s, shortly after I became pastor of a UCC church in Newton, Massachusetts, I naively asked my new congregation from the pulpit why each of the homes around the parsonage had their own lawnmowers. Sharing lawnmowers and other tools was one of many easy ways that our city could become an Acts chapter 2 verse 44 community, holding all things in common. Unfortunately, nothing came of that suggestion, apart from one very upset congregant suggesting to me privately that I was a communist. In the intervening years, I've considered that encounter many times. For this person, concern about communism overrode his commitment to generosity and sharing. For me, this encounter remains an enduring example of how difficult it can be to offer good news when gospel values challenge our immediate self-interest and our political or ideological point of view. While many, perhaps most, churches support recycling, and a few do all they can to integrate sustainable practices into their common life, much bolder efforts lie ahead of us. For decades, sojourners and other Christian communities have witnessed to Jesus' encouragement to love our neighbors as ourselves and to the early church's example of sharing all things in common. What if the church were to acknowledge the urgency of the climate crisis by elevating the practice of economic and environmental justice to the top of the list of ways that Christians live out our discipleship? Imagine tens of thousands of congregations engaged in an Acts chapter 2 verse 44 movement, consisting of a myriad of local experiments in democratized ownership and in pooling resources to leverage community engagement and economic revitalization. Here's an example that moved an entire congregation to tears. As the economy plummeted late in 2008 and early in 2009, many churches hunkered down in survival mode, but others stepped up to the challenge. At the height of the crisis, at a Sunday morning worship service in January 2009, a pastor in a Western Massachusetts church invited the congregation to express concerns or celebrations. An elderly woman stood. She was well known to the congregation, a widow, and not a person of means. With tremors in her voice, she asked for prayers. She couldn't make her next month's mortgage payment, and she feared being tossed out on the street. Then she sat down. The pastor knew in her bones what to do. She stood and declared in a quiet but firm voice, "No one in our congregation will lose their home to foreclosure." She went on to say that if the promise of abundant life is true, then each congregation, as a community, must make it true. And then she sat down, still shaking. The only thing the pastor knew for sure was that she had no idea how this would work out. 2 weeks later, during the time for celebrations and concerns, a different elderly widow who was known to have only her Social Security paycheck to live on raised her hand. She began by apologizing for taking a few weeks to do the math. Then she said, I just wanted you